Right now, in corporate boardrooms across the globe, executives are not calculating how to map out your long-term career trajectory. They're calculating exactly how many software licenses and API calls it takes to render your entire department completely obsolete.
Welcome to AI Market Mint.
Turn AI into income, turn knowledge into freedom.
Listen, the reality of what we are seeing in the market right now is creating a massive wave of anxiety. And, I talk to people every day who feel this profound lack of stability in their careers.
It's palpable. I mean, you can literally feel the panic in white-collar sectors.
Exactly. And the thing is, this career anxiety is not paranoia. It is a highly accurate biological response to a total systemic shift in economic leverage. Look, for the better part of the last 50 years, society operated on this unwritten contract.
Right, the whole go to school, get a job routine.
Right. You acquire a university degree, you secure a position in a corporate hierarchy, you put in your 40 hours a week, and in exchange, you are guaranteed a predictable, insulated slice of the middle class. But that contract is broken.
I have to push back on that a bit, though, because, corporations have always trimmed the fat. We see cyclical layoffs every single time the Federal Reserve adjusts interest rates or, a sector experiences a downturn.
Sure.
So why should we look at this current wave of layoffs and assume the foundation is permanently broken? Isn't this just a standard economic cycle?
The difference is what happens after the cycle recovers. Historically, companies would lay off middle management during a recession and then, quietly rehire them when capital became cheap again.
Because they needed the bodies to scale.
Exactly. But if you look at the raw corporate behavior over the last 18 months, the reality on the ground paints a completely different picture. Fortune 500 stalwarts are dismantling the middle layer of their organizational charts entirely.
And they have no intention of bringing those people back.
None. They are openly projecting that those specific roles will never be restaffed. They are not temporarily cutting human capital. They are permanently swapping it for digital capital.
Because digital capital is, well, it's functionally frictionless.
Precisely. From a purely operational standpoint, a corporation is always evaluating output versus friction. A human employee requires health benefits, paid time off, management oversight.
Periodic cost of living, salary increases, HR disputes, you name it.
Exactly. An autonomous software agent requires none of those things. So if your daily output relies on navigating a keyboard, summarizing data in a spreadsheet, or just aggregating updates for a status meeting, the organization has already classified you as a legacy expense.
Which means playing defense is a mathematically flawed strategy. If you are sitting at your desk right now trying to prove you can write a slightly more nuanced internal memo than a language model, you are competing on a battlefield where your opponent never sleeps.
And costs fractions of a penny to operate.
Right. And the emotional exhaustion of constantly looking over your shoulder to see if an algorithm is catching up to your daily output that drains the exact cognitive bandwidth you need to actually build wealth and escape that environment.
It's exhausting. But to really understand why society is so profoundly unprepared for this shift, we have to look at the architectural foundation of our current economy. We are still operating on hardware built by the Industrial Revolution.
Which was entirely based on compliance.
Yes, that era constructed a society that practically worshipped compliance. We optimized the global education system to mass-produce biological human calculators.
I love that phrase, biological human calculators.
Well, it's what we did. The entire modern corporate ladder was built on the premise that executing known instructions accurately and repeatedly was the highest possible form of value.
But the catastrophic structural flaw in that model, the one we just ignored for decades, is that human hardware has strict, inflexible biological limits.
Limits on processing power, speed, focus.
But we accepted those limits because, historically, cognitive processing was a scarce resource. If a business wanted to scale its cognitive output, say, generate a new financial model or write a block of code, they had to physically hire another human brain.
That scarcity was the only thing protecting the middle class. And that brings us to a fundamental shift in the market right now. We are moving toward a zero marginal cost of intelligence.
Wait, zero marginal cost sounds technical. What does that actually mean for a normal person?
Simple. It just means the price to produce one extra unit of something drops to practically nothing. Imagine it like water in a river. Digging the well costs money, but once the river is flowing, scooping out one extra cup of water costs you nothing.
Right. So when artificial intelligence reached the computational threshold where it could execute standard instructions at scale, the price to generate novel cognitive output just plummeted.
It is currently trending toward absolute zero. Think about the physical constraints. A human analyst takes a week to read 50 quarterly earnings reports, synthesize the data, and draft a summary,
And they require a salary, a desk, a laptop.
and time to sleep. A localized AI model can ingest all 50 reports and generate the identical summary in roughly 4 seconds.
At the cost of the electricity required to run the server?
Exactly. And the marginal cost of producing that second, third, or thousandth report is functionally zero.
The historical parallel that always comes to mind for me is the mechanization of agriculture. But the velocity here feels totally different. During the transition to mechanized farming, the people who suffered were the ones who stubbornly refused to let go of the manual shovel.
But that transition took generations.
Exactly. This shift from manual cognitive labor to artificial cognitive labor feels violently compressed. We are watching it play out in real time over a matter of, what, 2 or 3 years?
It is incredibly compressed. And that speed leads to a severe psychological blind spot. Psychologists refer to it as normalcy bias.
Because human beings are evolutionarily wired for slow, linear progression, we naturally expect tomorrow to look roughly identical to yesterday.
We are fundamentally ill-equipped to process exponential technological change. So when faced with radical disruption, the brain's defense mechanism is just to assume the threat is exaggerated.
People desperately convince themselves that their specific corporate role requires a special human touch or some unique creative intuition that a machine could never replicate.
Let me give you a highly realistic scenario that perfectly illustrates the danger of this bias. Let's look at someone we'll call Steve. Steve is a senior logistics analyst at a mid-sized regional retail chain. He makes a very comfortable salary, say $140,000 a year.
Okay, I know a dozen guys exactly like Steve.
Right. So Steve spends his days manually pulling inventory data from 3 different legacy software systems, and he pastes that data into a complex spreadsheet model he spent 3 years building.
Oh, man. And he assumes that because his company's legacy software is incredibly frustrating and unintuitive, his ability to navigate those specific quirks makes him indispensable.
Exactly. He confuses friction with value. He spends his entire week running this fragile model just to send out a static 20-page PDF report every Friday morning to the executive team.
Let me guess. He completely ignores industry warnings about automation because he thinks his specific retail sector moves too slowly.
He firmly believes it. But then the company brings in an external consulting firm to audit their operational efficiency.
And the consultants didn't ask Steve to teach them his spreadsheet, did they?
They bypassed him entirely. The consulting firm implemented a custom AI architecture over a single weekend. The AI didn't just mimic Steve's mouse clicks. It connected directly to the raw data streams of those 3 legacy databases.
Bypassing the clunky user interface entirely.
Yes, it analyzed the global inventory flow in real time, accurately predicted supply chain bottlenecks, and populated a live dashboard. It didn't wait until Friday to send a report.
And Steve was unceremoniously let go on a Tuesday.
He was.
But look, the real tragedy wasn't just that Steve lost his comfortable income. The absolute tragedy was his misallocated time. He spent 3 crucial years aggressively defending a fragile manual spreadsheet instead of learning how to manage the automated agent that ultimately replaced him.
His psychological bias locked him into a pathetic defensive posture. He was protecting the shovel instead of learning to drive the tractor. And this exact bias is rampant right now across finance, legal services, digital marketing, everywhere.
So we have stripped away the emotional comfort of Steve's story, but I want to look strictly at the brutal, unfeeling mathematics of why his role was eliminated. Because the illusion of the safe, salaried corporate job completely collapses when you examine the math.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the economic gravity pulling down the traditional employee. Most people only look at the top-line number on their employment contract. They fail to understand what inflation drag is doing to that number.
Wait, inflation drag sounds technical. What does that actually mean for a normal person?
It's simple. It just means the hidden cost of your money losing value over time while your expenses go up. Imagine it like trying to run up a down escalator. If you don't get a raise that beats real inflation, your salary is actually shrinking every single month.
Exactly. An employee is the most heavily taxed entity in the global economy. You have no deductions for operational life expenses. You combine that with real compounding inflation on housing, energy, food, and your purchasing power is just violently evaporating.
And that depreciation intersects with opportunity cost in a really dangerous way.
Let's scrutinize that logic. Because the opportunity cost is the profit you lose by choosing one path over another. If I'm a traditional employee, my financial output is strictly capped by the biological limit of hours I can stay awake and work,
You are trading your finite, non-renewable cognitive bandwidth for a fixed, depreciating fiat currency.
which is a terrible trade. Now, contrast that capped mathematical model with the economics of an AI-augmented micro enterprise.
Let's say you operate a lean digital marketing agency.
Hmm.
Historically, if you wanted to double your client load, you'd have to hire 3 junior analysts.
And when you factor in the true cost of capital salaries, payroll taxes, software seats, management overhead, those 3 human employees easily cost $250,000 annually.
Easily. And today, you deploy an enterprise-grade AI stack. You pay for the licenses, the cloud computing power, and the API calls. The total cost might be $5,000 for the entire year.
So you have instantly eliminated $250,000 in operational friction from your balance sheet. The output remains the same, or even improves in speed, but the cost drops by 98%.
That is labor arbitrage on absolute steroids.
It creates a harsh, unavoidable binary for everyone listening right now. Look, if you remain a traditional employee, the corporate structure uses AI to capture that massive profit margin from your eliminated labor. But if you own the automated system yourself, you capture the entire margin.
There is no middle ground where you just get to keep your job and ignore the math. None. And because this math is so aggressively one-sided, society is rapidly splitting into 2 distinct permanent financial classes.
We're seeing a massive, irreversible bifurcation, path A and path B.
Let's map those out. Because the consequences of choosing the wrong one are permanent. Path A is the default trajectory for the vast majority of the population. These are the individuals who stay paralyzed by normalcy bias.
The Steves.
The Steves. They passively wait for slow-moving government regulations or legacy labor unions to magically protect their obsolete jobs. And eventually they get caught in a massive corporate restructuring phase.
And because millions of mid-level cognitive jobs are being wiped out simultaneously, where do they go? I mean, they get dumped into a hyper-saturated, low-skilled digital gig economy.
Displaced workers flood the remaining service markets. And that massive sudden oversupply of human labor drives wages down to the absolute floor.
They are left with zero autonomy, zero structural leverage, and they become entirely dependent on whatever restricted assistance programs the government decides to offer.
It is a bleak reality.
It's terrifying. So what is the alternative? What is path B?
Path B is the trajectory of the system orchestrators. These are the rare individuals who recognize the massive fundamental shift early. They immediately stop identifying as standard employees and start operating as sovereign digital businesses.
I have to pause you there, though, because a lot of people listening have mortgages, they have families, they have obligations. Telling someone to just become a sovereign digital business overnight sounds like massive, irresponsible risk. Are we suggesting people just quit their corporate jobs tomorrow and hope for the best?
Not at all. The shift is psychological and operational first. You can build this leverage while still inside a corporate structure. The individuals on Path B leverage AI tools to multiply their personal output.
Right, because the structural friction of scaling drops to near zero.
Exactly. A single person equipped with the right AI architecture can consistently generate the operational output of a 50-person legacy company. They command the leverage, so they capture the massive market premium.
I want to emphasize something crucial for you listening right now. Inaction is not a neutral stance. You cannot just wait this out on the sidelines to see what happens. Inaction is an automatic, mandatory enrollment into Path A. You cannot slowly transition over a decade.
It requires a violent pivot.
All right.
So knowing that inaction guarantees a spot on Path A, the immediate question is, how exactly do you aggressively restructure your professional life to secure a place on Path B?
What are the actual mechanics of the transition? If staying an employee is mathematically guaranteed to wipe out my leverage, how do I actually unplug from that system without going broke?
The crucial first step is to kill the employee mindset permanently. You are no longer a passive worker exchanging your biological time for a predictable paycheck. You are an asset manager.
And your primary asset is your focused attention and your strategic vision.
Exactly. So the transition is from manual executor to system orchestrator.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that. I hear a lot about API leverage in the market.
Wait, API leverage sounds technical. What does that actually mean for a normal person?
Simple. It just means setting up your software tools so they talk to each other automatically. Imagine it like a massive team of invisible assistants passing documents between departments without you ever having to lift a finger.
That's exactly it.
Ah.
You do not need to know how to write complex code from scratch.
Yeah.
You just need to understand that digital plumbing.
So instead of manually downloading a CSV file from my email, cleaning the data, and uploading it to a CRM, which takes, what, an hour?
Right.
I set up a trigger. When the email arrives, the data is automatically routed to an AI. It cleans it based on my prompt and pushes it directly into the CRM in 3 seconds.
Yes. The exact execution strategy here is to run a ruthless audit of your workflow. You must audit every single manual task you perform in a given week.
If a task requires repetitive data entry, standardized financial analysis, or basic content generation, you must eliminate it from your manual plate.
You automate it using off-the-shelf AI and robust infrastructure tools.
And it is worth noting because people fail constantly when they try to build this without reliable systems. You need to use verified platforms for this operational plumbing. You don't want to wire your professional workflow through random unverified tools and risk massive data leaks or getting scammed.
You have to build on stable infrastructure.
Which is why we've put the official verified links in the pinned comment below. Don't go searching randomly and get scammed. Use the ones we've checked. It simplifies the execution entirely.
And that stability is key because the ultimate goal of all this automation isn't just to sit back and do nothing. The goal is to recover your cognitive bandwidth.
Yes.
You take the 10 hours a week you used to spend doing data entry, and you violently redirect them into deep strategy, relationship building, complex problem solving, and identifying entirely new market opportunities.
You focus intensely on the rare things that require deep human nuance. The specific things silicon cannot yet replicate. That is how you bulletproof your income. You don't stubbornly try to compete with the machine by running faster. You stand on top of it.
You use it as a massive digital exoskeleton to multiply your force in the open market.
A digital exoskeleton, I love that. The individuals who quickly learn to allocate artificial intelligence efficiently will ultimately control the future of capital distribution. The barrier to entry has completely vanished. The tools required to build this leverage are sitting directly in front of you.
The comfortable middle ground of the economy has completely disappeared. You are either the architect commanding these automated systems, or you are the expensive redundancy being systematically dismantled.
The unwritten contract is void, and it is entirely up to you to write the new one. Look, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. Look at your daily workflow tomorrow. What is the one specific task you perform that relies purely on deep human empathy, nuanced relationship building, or creative foresight?
Because if you can't easily identify it, an algorithm is already calculating the cost to replace you.
How will you redesign your blueprint before the math catches up to you? Don't let the future leave you behind. Start earning.